Today I'm going to talk about precisely this, 10 things that I wish somebody would have told me before I ever started experimenting. So you're going to get to learn about all my mistakes, all my failures. So if you wanted to attend a presentation that was going to make you feel really good about yourself, this is the presentation to have definitely come to. On that note, I thought A/B testing would be easy. I mean, it's kind of a simple topic, right? You take a change to a product, you show it to one group, the other group you don't show it to. So I should actually call this 11 things I wish somebody had told me, because that is where I got it wrong. A/B testing actually isn't that easy, and there's a lot of places where you can go wrong within the product or when running any of these tests, very simply. So the first thing, I mean, we've heard several different speakers come up here this morning. Two mentioned experiments. Experimentation is everywhere, and it's also all over Atlassian, and it's experiment, experiment, experiment all the time, all the time. But there comes a point where you should actually talk to yourself and say, you know what? Maybe this thing is just broken and I should just fix it. Doesn't actually need an experiment. One of the first things I suggested, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, when I first started experimenting was there was a few links that were broken within Jira, and I was like, all right, first experiment, let's fix the links. And took that to my boss, and my boss was like, Amber, they're broken. Fix the links. You don't need to experiment to know that fixing a link is going to make it better. At the same time, there's a lot of experiments that are worthy of doing. So it's about weeding out the ones that may not have that much value, potentially don't roll up to an OKR that you're even working on. So it's more about finding the ones that you feel could truly drive some type of impact. The other piece is having a very clearly defined goal. I will never forget, this was a year ago, we were starting our new fiscal year, and I was in our strategy meeting with Mike and Scott, our founders, and the head of Jira and Bitbucket for software teams, what I was working on. And they said, all right, Amber, here's your goal. For the coming year, you are on activation, growth, experimentation. We need you to do this for 1 year, and you need to raise activation within Bitbucket by 30% by the end of the year. And they looked at me and they're like, all right, you got this? And so I said the political thing, which was, let me go back to my desk and think about it, when really in my mind I wanted to jump across that table, slap somebody in the face and say, are you serious? I mean, 30% for these products is hundreds of thousands of users. So I was like, how in the world am I going to be able to take the goal of gigantic activation, which activation for us was getting a user to stick around for 2 weeks, and improve that by 30%? 30%. So I did go back to my desk, I did what I said, and started thinking about the problem. And what I realized was that goal is just too broad, too broad. And when you're working with experiments, you have to be more specific. So instead, we narrowed it down. And we said, all right, well, what is it that gets a user to that second week? And for us, that was, well, we get them into the product, and we need them to create a repository for their code. All right, step 1. We need them to store some code in that repository. Step 2. And then we need them to clone or kind of copy that code onto their local computer. And if we can get them to do all 3 of those things, we are more likely to keep them around to the second week. So we then started to frame our experiments around those 3 things. We said, all right, this specific experiment is going to be aimed at getting somebody to create that first repository, that first place where they can house their code. That's it. We're not trying to get that person to stay until the second week. We're just trying to get them to create that first step to create that repository. And by making those small, very specific metrics that led up to the gigantic, broad metric, we were actually able to get that 30% goal by the end of the year. And we did it all with tiny experiments that were aimed at very specific metrics. Finally, or not finally, we have a lot more to go. Experiments should be planned and not rushed. When we had that 30% goal, initially we were just like, holy crap, we got to do this as fast as we can possibly go, right? I mean, to hit 30%, that's going to mean like 1 million different experiments. We're going to hope that we can get there and just go, go, go. But what happened by not planning is we ended up making a ton of mistakes. We rolled things out that were impartial. We didn't always have the right analytics in place. And then we had to just kind of step back and slow down and say that, to actually be successful, we need to plan what it is we are going to do. We need to make sure these experiments make sense with each other, make sure that they're actually going towards our goal of that 2-week activation number. Another one is iteration to perfection. The goal of an experiment is not necessarily to hit some great number. I mean, that's awesome if it happens, but what you're really trying to do is you're just trying to find opportunity, right? Melissa gave a great example this morning. She said, remember we just put a menu, we just wrote the word menu at the top instead of hiding it behind a menu, and bam, we got our numbers up. They didn't go and create, another thing that said menu, and then it highlighted itself in bright pink if you clicked on it and did all these great things and sparkled. No, they started with just the very basic, let's just add another menu button, see what happens. And by doing that, they were able to see that there is opportunity in calling out menu versus hiding it behind this little hamburger button. So the goal is to iterate, and then once you find that opportunity, then go further and get to that perfect state. Another one is figuring out how will your experiment be measured. True story. We were running an experiment, this is one of my first, where we wanted, within Jira, to make it to where if you share a board or share a ticket or invite a user to it, that flow would be easier. And we came up with this great experiment for it. It was going to be awesome. We start running this experiment. We're going. We go to start measuring the experiment because it's been on for a day. And then we realize, man, we're tracking if people are clicking the invite button. We're tracking who they invited. We somehow forgot to implement, is this person in the experiment or not? So we had no idea of who was actually in the experiment and who was in the control group. We had to start the entire thing over and re-implement it. Another point, seasonality does matter. And I hear this all the time, and everybody's like, no, it doesn't matter because it's an A/B test. So even if you run it in December, it's fine because both groups are going to be experiencing that Christmas lag, and that's fine. That's true. However, it does slow down your experiments. A great example is Europe. So in August every year, I know that my experiments, if I have any of them that are currently running, they're going to take forever to run. Because in order to hit significance with any type of experiment, you have to have a certain amount of people be a part of those experiments. And for whatever reason, Europe, I don't know where you all go in August, but you just disappear. And what happens when Europe disappears, it's getting those numbers and that population size becomes incredibly difficult. So those experiments that should have only taken 2 weeks to run end up taking 3, 4, sometimes into a month, depending on how big the experiment is. Another point is that user segments can easily impact an experiment. In our particular case, Bitbucket is a great one. If you look at how people come into the product, can alter an experiment. So for us, people are oftentimes invited by a company. A company is what joins, and then all of a sudden, all at once, you get 5,000 people that join as a part of that company. They all join, and they're all using Bitbucket. That is a lot different than the random user that comes into Bitbucket because they want to start their own ad hoc project, right, and start working that way. I know that I am more likely going to keep the people that came in as a part of their company than I am that random person that came up and just kind of wanted to check things out. So knowing what those segments are within your product, especially how they come in, especially if they come in bulk like that, are important to note when running any experiment because they can alter your results. Another thing is being wary of too many changing variables. Last year, we implemented an entirely new source browser within Bitbucket. It was awesome, fantastic. We raised our numbers tremendously. It was one of the main reasons why our 2-week wow ended up going up, or those 2-week activators ended up going up. When we were trying to actually figure out what it was, what specifically about the source browser got people's attention, we had a hard time telling you because there were so many things that changed that there may have been something that we actually included in that new experiment that was doing horribly, but we had no way of telling because we ended up implementing too many changes all at once. All right. Oh, there we go. Maybe. There we go. Another thing, and this one has bitten me in the ass before horribly, is making sure that if the results are too good, double check them, triple check them, quadruple check them, because they may actually be too good to be true. One of my beginning experiments, we had released a very similar experience. Our numbers skyrocketed. We were like, man, this super tiny change, it did so awesome. I wrote this internal blog on Confluence about it. The founders commented on it. They were like, this is great. When are you going to roll this out? This is going to be awesome in Jira. We're like, yeah, go team. Got all this praise. We went to update the page with the new numbers, right? And I'm looking at the query for it. And then I quickly realized one big filter that was at the end of it that was not supposed to be there. When we removed that, we ended up realizing that the experiment, not only was it not going up like it showed, it was actually going down. So then I had the beautiful task of having to respond to Mike and Scott's comments on this blog and be like, hey, I know you thought this was great, but it was actually bad, my bad. Could have swore I was going to get fired, but luckily they have still kept me around. And then finally, always document your stuff. I cannot tell you how many people will come up to me in the hallway and be like, hey, Amber, did you do anything on December 13th, 2015? And you look at them like, I don't know if I did anything on December 13th. What did you do on December 13th, 2015? So having something that you can always refer back to, especially with experiments when you're making quick changes like that, is crucial. Especially because many times all of these different experiments that you're doing, what can end up happening is that when you do them, they have this long tail. And what you think may not have had an impact could have actually had an impact further, maybe in a different category of values that you weren't looking at, or it just took a while for that experiment to have impact. So it's extremely important to always, always document. But experimentation is supposed to be fun. It's getting more popular. It's not scary. It can be a little bit difficult, but I think by having those 10 things under your tool belt, I think you're going to be perfectly fine. So just remember them. Don't make the same mistakes as me. If you ever need somebody to talk to about experimentation, you can always give me a call, LinkedIn me, message me, and we can talk. So, thank you.